Welcome, everyone. We are so glad to have you with us today for our Art of Digital Forensics and Incident Response webinar with Heather Barnhart. Thank you so much, Heather, for being here. Heather is our DFIR curriculum lead at SANS. She's also a faculty fellow instructor, an author, course lead for multiple courses. And she does a plethora of other things, which I will let her talk about. But we are so glad to have her with us today to share about digital forensics and incident response. And so I'm going to pass on over to her.
Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. I I know I sent something out saying this is what this talk is going to be, but in my true nature, changed it up a little bit because one of the investigations I'm working, I now have been released to publicly speak about, and it's all over the media. So I want to share with you more details on that. Um, it's hot off the press. So I will get started quickly on who I am and some background. You can see here the two class coins. So I am a fellow instructor. I'm also the course lead for the smartphone course, which is the 585, the pretty purple coin. And then the ugly monster on the left is the Windows Forensics class, which I am the lead author of that one as well. For my background, just quickly, I graduated from West Virginia. I am one of the few people that I know that actually used my degree toward a career. However, forensics is the only thing that is true of what I learned. I was more bloodstain pattern analysis. So think of CSI well before CSI existed. I have been doing this job for 23 years. I used to joke that after 20, I was going to quit forensics altogether and open a flower shop. Yet here I am because I really do love it. It is a huge passion of mine. I am grateful every single day for the work I get to do. I do have multiple day jobs, it seems. I work at Celebrate, where I do forensic research and work investigations. And then at SANS, I feel like I do a million different things. So that's a little bit about me. But this side right here, this is what sums me up. So how did I get from that left bloodstain pattern analysis, which we would truly do that. We had this forensic room where they would put sponges of blood and we would go in and say, okay, if you're hit with a baseball bat, it looks like this. If it's shot at, it looks like this. If, all the different crimes we had to prepare for. And then we would go in and string walls. It was the weirdest thing when I would try to tell my dad what I was doing in college. He's like, I have no idea what is actually happening. So how did I get from that on the left to I found this ridiculous chicks and computers? I was never on computers like that, but it was all about being in the right place at the right time. I was in the Air National Guard to pay for my college tuition. And I remember just thinking, I'm going to do bloodstain pattern analysis. That's what I'm meant to do. And then 9/11 happened. This was my senior year of college. And I remember when this happened, there was a lot of money that was put into cyber and trying to stop terrorism before it even started. So trying to figure out how these people were planning, where their training camps were. And that organization funded a lot of things in cyber. I had never heard about computer forensics. I had never heard about digital forensics, incident response, no clue. And I remember flying to my drill weekend for the National Guard, and someone said, are you that forensic girl? Do you think you could do computer forensics? And at this point, I said, I can do anything. I can do absolutely anything. I just need to get a job because my dad was always on me. You graduated. Why do you not have a job? So that's how I landed my first job. And this is a brief description of my career over the last 23 years. So my first job at the ripe age of 22 years old, I worked at the Department of State as a contractor for Mantech. I went on search warrants in Mexico for visa fraud, passport fraud. I went on search warrants in South Carolina, Idaho. Like I remember going to all these places, having no idea what I was doing. A lot of lessons learned there. I left and I did 3 years of consulting. For any of you who may end up in the consulting world, it is some of the most exhausting work you will ever do because you're answering to attorneys who often are not technical in nature. So it is exhausting. When I mentioned the 9/11 stuff, I became a DoD contractor and I ran a mobile device forensics lab. And while I was there, I worked bin Laden's device. So that's one of my biggest career claim to fame, which is interesting. I don't think I mentioned that at all in this presentation of cool cases I've worked. But I did work Osama bin Laden's media. I did track every movement that man made in his training camps and everything for about 5 years before he was eliminated, as our awards call it. So I did that job for about 6.5 years, and it was strictly terrorism, threats on our nation, threats on schools. So we considered terrorism even threatened school shootings and things like that because it's terror, and it's homegrown terror, unfortunately. So it started a lot with bin Laden and then went into ISIS and all of the other organizations. When that became just, it's too much, I went to Celebrate. And at Celebrate, I've had many different hats I've worn, but continued working cases. I did start with SANS in 2011, so I've been here quite a long time. But you can see on the right-hand side, I've done a little bit of everything. So the child crimes, political investigations, divorce cases, murder, terrorism, cold cases, which are the ones I love that I'll talk about, but essentially research and development that make our world safer. And that's what I try to tell my kids. My job that keeps me so busy is helping their future. And that's what I like to think digital forensics incident response is. So some big cases that I want to share with you before I break down all these different things and I guess the realness of digital forensics. Bad things happen all the time. We are all addicted to our phones. We're all addicted to our computers. We connect in our cars. We have them on our bedside table. We have them with us no matter what. Your phones can tell a truth about things that no one can solve. So on the left-hand side, this is the Delphi murders. That's a picture of Abby and Libby. They were 14 and 15 years old. They were brutally murdered by that suspect there in the blue jacket. That photo was from Snapchat. That was the only digital trail leading to a potential suspect. He cleaned up with bleach at the crime scene. Everything was really clean. This murder happened, I think, oh my goodness, it was 5 years old when I started working it, and the man was just found guilty. So it took years. They would have been 20 years old by the time the killer was found. But digital evidence with third-party application data led to him. On the right-hand side, and this is where things don't always go well, this is Emily Noble on the left. That's her husband on the right. I personally believe that he killed her and that he hid her body for 3 months under a house. I believe all this stuff from the data I found on his phone. The FBI criminal profilers brought me in to help in the evening, just for fun, to help solve this investigation. The jury didn't find him guilty. We found information on his device of when we think he killed her, how we think it happened, but there was reasonable doubt. So things don't always end the way that we hope they will. But for this one, it just came out and it did. I have been working as a digital forensic expert alongside my husband. So yes, I keep work very close to me on the Idaho murders. So these four, if you're not familiar with Idaho murders, Brian Koberger just pled guilty to brutally murdering these four college students. Um, the FBI brought us in. So the FBI, two of them had taken my SANS training, and they called me and said, "Hey, we can't find the reason. We can't find anything on these devices. Can you come in and help us?" And I said, "Absolutely." So that's how I got involved. I've been working this now for almost 2.5 years, and we were subpoenaed to testify between now and November, but then Brian Koberger pled guilty. But all of this came down to his hard drive and his smartphone. And without being the author and instructor of Forensics 500 and 585, I wouldn't have even known where to start. So all of these little examples here, as an author and instructor of SANS, that's what I put right back into the classes. So the things that make me struggle every day in my investigations, I immediately feed right back into the courses. So that's one of the interesting things about having instructors still be practitioners, because it feeds right into any student that wants to take these classes. And I am definitely biased, Betsy, but I think DFIR is the most exciting. I think this stuff is amazing. I have sadly been quoted where I say I love murder. I don't love to murder, but I love working murder investigations because it's so intriguing. When we think of Idaho, so I can't see you guys, I can't see you raise hands or anything. But if anyone has seen the Dateline episode, if you've seen TikTok, if you've heard my RSA talk, I'm not going to assume that any of you want to listen to RSA keynotes because I know they can be quite numbing and boring. My RSA keynote this year was about dark periods of data. And what I explained that to be was the lack of data. So, right now, if you're going to investigate me, you're going to hope that you can put me at a location to where the murder occurred. Or maybe I have Google searches. Maybe I purchased my knife through my phone. Brian Koberger cleaned up his device really, really well. He was an advanced user. He used incognito browsing. He cleaned up his PC. He not only cleaned up, but he cleared his cache. He ran eraser on things. So there's so many things that he did to make forensics harder, but he made mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And that's where we really try to dig in. I see someone has a hand raised, but I don't know how. You can unmute yourself. You can ask, you can interrupt me at any point.
I don't know if they can unmute themselves, but you can put a question in the chat or put a
Thank you.
Q&A.
So yeah, if the question comes in, please feel free to ask anything on this. But this case right here was one of the hardest that I have worked. For the Delphi murders with Abby and Libby, what I was hoping for was to find a Bluetooth ping. Because if you think about your phone is constantly pinging other Bluetooth devices. So right now I'm on my AirPods connected to my Mac. My phone knows that my AirPod is here. My phone knows that my PC is sitting there. So if it pings something else, that is extremely helpful. And that's what we're awful or often hoping for is that there's some kind of data. For the right-hand side, I'm going to talk about health data coming up. But for Emily Noble, health data showed exactly how many steps they took when they left a bar and when she stopped using her device. All of those things came into play. For Brian Koberger's, we did not, a lot of people want to know, did you see suspect information or did you see victim information? Why? And sadly, we couldn't find the why. That's something I really wanted to get back to the families to say, this is why he murdered your children. And we couldn't find that, which is extremely unfortunate. But we were able to show that he prepared and that he cleaned up his computer and that he knew the importance of digital forensics in investigations and how it can really be the final thing. All right, let's talk about some other ones that you may have heard of. Sometimes the answer is not easy for those asking you what it actually is. They don't necessarily want the answer. So when we're looking at some of these things here, the Middle Tennessee, there was a man who was shot and killed, and the FBI came to us and said, hey, we need you to say that this kid that lives next door is the one that shot him, all because of health data and the research that I had been putting out. But what we couldn't say, if you have 500 steps on your phone, we can't say you walk 500 steps in a straight line. You could walk back and forth to your coffee pot. You could walk back and forth to these doors behind me, and it's 500 steps total. So just because it could be, I will never testify and say, yes, that's definitely what it is, unless I'm 100% sure. Crystal Rogers, the bottom one, this just went to trial. It's from 2015 and just went to trial. And all they needed us to testify on was how was her phone powered off? So the father of her child killed her. He claimed his only alibi was that Crystal was awake and playing video games on her phone, which she wasn't. She was already dead. But he pulled the battery from her phone. So think about old phones. You could rip the battery out of the back and keep them separate. Where he messed up was he plugged it in and it turned on, and then he had to turn it off again. So they wanted to prove his intention behind her device. The Long Island serial killers. This is one of the newer ones. What's interesting is he had a throwaway phone for every single victim that he murdered over 2 decades. So imagine that massive amount of digital forensics data that exists. It was crazy. When I was interviewed for this one, what I talked about on the Chris Cuomo News Nation, you cannot be two people at the exact same time. So right now I have CTF devices all the time. If I'm on my other device and I'm on this one, you're not texting at the exact same time. You're not making phone calls. So you look at pattern of life and normal behavior, and that's how you sense the abnormal. And that's super important to just keep in mind when we're looking at these types of cases. I'm going to break down the differences for you of digital forensics versus incident response. But one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, the answer should always be it depends. Every single forensic class you take in your life, or every expert you talk to, any forensic book you read, you will see often where it said it depends. People will come to me and say, Heather, can you unlock this phone? Heather, can you find this browser history? Someone deleted a text message. Can you find it? And I say, well, it depends. And the questions I typically ask, um, what type of device is it? Is it locked? Is it a PC? Is it a Mac? What are we looking at? Is it a Linux system? So all of these things come into play. But what's super important, whether it's the victim, the suspect, the person accused, every single thing you do on an electronic device leaves a trace. Every single contact leaves a trace. And it's so true. So if I even just tap my screen and see it light up to check the time, that leaves a trace. Not only does it leave a trace, but it shows if my phone is faced this way or this way. So everything you do, if I keep tapping it, it does it. If I unlock my device, all of these things leave a trace. If I delete an app, if I clear my browser history, every single thing you do leaves a trace. Those are the cool things to find in investigations, is the how. And it's not always easy. Now, where these two careers differ, pun intended. I actually didn't intend to do that, but now I'm going to say pun intended. So digital forensics incident response, we typically mesh this all together as one thing, but they're very different skill sets. I heard we just had a DFIR summit, and one of the presenters said digital forensics versus incident response. If there's a fire, the incident responders would go, they'd be the firefighters. They know how to put out the fire. They fight it, they put the flames out. Once everything's good, they leave a report, they walk away. The digital forensics, these would be your fire investigator saying, was it arson? How did the fire start? Why did it start? Why did it burn as long as it did? And they would put the why behind it. So if you think of the ultimate incident responder, they need digital forensics as a background. Because if you have those types of people that could say, hey, I know how to collect the data, I know how to do the analysis, I know how to contain any breach that occurred or any malware or attacker that's on a system, I can eradicate it and make it stop. I can help the organization recover because I did forensic analysis. And then I can make it better so it doesn't happen again. That is your ultimate dream. But sadly, it's a big divide. I would say I lean very heavily into digital forensics because I don't like looking at log files. I find it to be extremely boring. There are people that are like, I love network traffic and log files. I would never want to have a phone or a PC and have to acquire it and look at that data. So this is where it becomes interesting. This is where you could say, you know what, I want to do both. And that's fantastic. But one thing I would caution you on is knowing just enough to be dangerous. And I do have a little mean on that because some people are like, oh, yeah, I can do all of this, but they don't know everything. So this is where you have to be careful. All right. So I am going to let you think about this slide for a second. So look at that graphic. And we know that this is true. Think about, has anybody been to a concert recently? It's insane. Like, I also wonder how many people even watch things anymore or look through the lens. Like when I'm on vacation with my kids, I stopped taking pictures of every single thing because I'm like, am I even enjoying this? You're constantly on your devices all of the time. When we look at technology, if I were in person, I would say, who here doesn't have a phone? I have met one person recently. I was speaking at a high school and he didn't have a phone yet. And I was like, you know what? Good for your parents. This is actually impressive, but it's rare. I have 4 phones because I'm creating test data all the time. Right now in front of me, I have 3 different computers. We are so technology driven and addicted that we don't know how to function without them. We require them for school, we require them for work, we require them for social media, for our social lives, for our photos. All of these things come into play. Now, where it gets messy, everything I just talked to you about, what about data synchronization? What if you have to say where a crime started, where an attacker truly got in? What if an attacker is lurking in cloud and then just hops to different things? So all of these things come into play. It's often really difficult, even for me. If you said, Heather, where is all of your data right now? Where does it exist? I don't know, because sometimes I even log in to certain things with my Google account. So Google may have access to that social media and it becomes very messy. Marco, I see your question on where would you say the D for experts insert themselves into the prep identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. Everyone, if you want to be a solid D for professional, you really have to be good at all of those skills. You have to know all of those things. Now, I would say containment is not my specialty, but that's where I have smart friends. But all of the other things, I'm like, oh yeah, I could see this and I found it. How to make it stop or what to do, that's not my trained skill set. So I think having enough knowledge in each of those things is extremely important, but you don't have to be perfect in everything. And that is something that I think a lot of job announcements make it seem like you must be perfect in all these things. Nobody is. And it's my boss at SANS, Jeremy, he's like, it's almost like people expect unicorns. And it's true. Like you cannot be the forensic unicorn. Sadly, I feel like some people would see me and say, oh, yeah, Heather's that forensic unicorn. And it's not true. I just admitted to you that containment is a weakness for me. So if we went back to this, I would say, ooh, the containment makes me extremely uncomfortable. But I have great friends and people that I work with on my teams that could do that part. So hopefully that answered your question a bit. The hurdles in digital forensics. So you can see all the things here that make it hard. You know what you do on your devices. You know if things are encrypted, if things are stored in cloud, are they protected with multi-factor authentication? But things that make our jobs really hard, criminals preparing. So I talked about Idaho murders, but think about the other side of this. Think about attackers learning how to do a breach, but look like normal behavior using AI. So AI is training people how to be better criminals, which is unfortunate. AI is being used to hack systems because the AI output that you get from these LLMs is as good as the question being asked. So really crafty attackers will keep changing their question until they get the output that they actually desire. Steve Sims talked about that last year at RSA in 2024, which is interesting, where he essentially he tricked AI into building ransomware for him just by changing his questions repeatedly and keeping all the answers. It can happen. Legal aspects. How quickly can you legally get access to the data? Because data cleans itself on these computers and on these phones. For users, this is unfortunate. Sextortion has been a huge thing that has been popping up. Sadly, I have a friend that works at SANS that it just happened to one of their family members. There are training groups in Africa teaching people, saying, hey, if you do this to these kids in the UK and North America, you can have a Lamborghini. So they're making it attractive to these young people, saying all you have to do is reach out to these 100 users today, pretending to be a 15-year-old girl that likes these boys, get them to send a nude photo of themselves, and then ask them for $1,000. And if not, tell them to go kill themselves. It's terrible, but there's no emotion behind it. These guys want the Lamborghini in Africa, so they don't care. Now, where I say poor users, when that happens to a kid, when they delete the chat or they delete that application, we can't do forensics and try to stop these people if the data's gone. And this is where it's constant education. Something I said to my husband this morning when my friend reached out to me, I was like, you know what? Maybe word is actually getting out. And we're teaching people, report it to the police. Even if you sent a photo of yourself, who cares? You could be saving another kid that's not as smart as you for reporting it. In this instance, the kid told their parents and said, hey, I thought this was a teenage girl. I sent her a photo of myself, and now she's saying she's going to post these pictures of me on social media if I don't pay her this money. Because her is probably some 54-year-old guy that wants a Lamborghini in Africa. And that's what we have to just keep telling people. So I'm hoping it's getting better because sadly the suicide rate was increasing in teenage boys. The target age is boys ages 10 to 14 years old. So it's extremely unfortunate, but that's what I mean by poor users. So we want to make sure that people know you can get out of these crimes. Now, I like Big Bang Theory. You may not know who Sheldon is, but I love this. When I look at this meme here where it says, let's just assume that everything you have done up until now is wrong. When I get students in the classroom, some of them are so set in their ways and they don't think through the entire process, or they don't think logically. They don't think like, oh, I need to use more than one tool. Oh, I need to create test data. One of the things, what if the tools contradict one another? What if the tool is wrong? Now, I work at a vendor and I love saying this to people. I actually did a presentation at Celebrate's C2C Summit showing where our tool was wrong. And people are like, why would you do that? Because it's so important. The tool cannot make sense if data is human created or not. All these tools do, it says, okay, here's data from this PC. Yep, this is what it shows. It would be like a tool telling you what normal activity on a user looks like. They can't do that. Same thing with a lot of the logs. I remember the first time I worked in incident response investigation, and my boss said to me, I need you to find the red flags in this log. And I went to him, I'm like, I don't know what any flag looks like. How am I supposed to tell you what's abnormal if I don't even know what's normal? So this is where it's really difficult. If you can't find data, why? Are you lost in the chaos of the data? Why? So this is where that final thought that I said earlier, you cannot know enough to be dangerous. Say, I don't know. Say, I don't understand the logs. Um, I need time to create test data because you don't want to put yourself in a corner and tarnish your career in digital forensics because it's a fantastic career and it's something that I think is so fun that maybe you would love as well. Now let's talk about what your phones and apps do on computers, whether it's a Mac, a PC, or a phone. If we were in person, I'd say, how many of you have an application installed on your device? Most people are like, yep, yes, I do. I have tons. I have everything from like little kid apps for my daughter to financial applications for my retirement, social media, all these things. Do you know what these apps do in the background? Do you know what's hidden inside of them? What happens if you delete them? What does this do for you for privacy versus me for forensics? So I want to give you some examples here. Here is a good example. I took this photo years ago, back in 2013, and I remember it asked me, do I want to store location information? And I said, no, no, I do not. However, if your phone says, do you want directions to this? Do you want location information? Do you want to remember where you were in this moment? It already assumes you're going to say yes. So when you say no, it has to hide that information somewhere. I always thought this would go into memory. It does not. It is written into databases and you have to dig through it in a hex viewer. So here you could see all the information with even weather. So you can see my full home address, you can see the file it was associated to, what I wrote about it, all of it is available. And a lot of people don't think about this. Now, this one is crazy. This is from my personal iPhone. That is a picture of my daughter from when she was about to start walking. When you look at these different timestamps, so you see the device time, and then that bottom arrow is pointing to different sets of timestamps. The device time is where I was when I saved that photo to my phone. So this photo came to me through a text message. Where I was located is that address, that Creekside Drive, Arbor Point Apartments, Newcastle County, Delaware. I saw that. I'm like, never been there. When I clicked on it, it's the Amtrak train running right behind those train tracks. So not only did my iPhone know when I saved it, the 2/7 date is when I posted it on Instagram, but it knows exactly where I was in the world when I pressed the arrow to save it to my phone. It's crazy. It's amazing what we can do with these artifacts. Test data. If I teach you anything, it's to not trust what you see unless you're 100% sure. I create test data for almost every single investigation I work now, all of them. So when we're looking, your tools are going to disagree. The data is not going to make sense. You need to make sense of it. Now, this is a case scenario here that some of these case scenarios coming up are graphic. I apologize. I'm sure I said a lot of graphic stuff already with murder, but this is one that I learned my lesson on. When I started my career young, I was told you do forensics to support law enforcement, the government, the military. You work against the people who did heinous crimes. When I worked at Strauss Friedberg doing consulting, Lamar Owens, who is on the right-hand side, he was the quarterback for the Naval Academy. He was accused of raping Kimberly Koss, who was on the left-hand side. And Strauss decided to take a pro bono case and work Lamar Owens. And I was assigned to it. And I said, absolutely not. I have been trained that I should be working for Kimberly Koss. I'm not going to help this guy who raped this woman. That's immediately what I said. I refused to sit in conference rooms with him. I refused to do anything. So I worked her computer instead of his. And I found, now this is going back, an AOL instant message from her asking him to come tuck her in. When she filed this rape case, she said she didn't know him other than seeing him at football games. She had never talked to him. When we found this chat, I remember my stomach dropping and I felt so sick because I was like, oh my gosh, they were in a relationship. He actually didn't rape her. His claim was she had a boyfriend, didn't want anyone to know. We were in a relationship. She would invite me over. I would go over. I don't know why this time was different. So he was so confused. When we found that, she dropped the case. Lamar Owens still lost his commission. He was supposed to be drafted to the NFL, never got it. Nothing happened to Kimberly Koss. So for me, this was a huge gut check to me on data is data. You don't get involved emotionally in these cases. I think I was 25 years old when I took this on. So I was really young and naive, but data is data. Whether it's defense or prosecution, we need to let the forensics tell the truth. And this was a hard one for me to come to terms with, but I think it's super important that you realize that we need to let the logs tell the truth of the incident. We need to let the forensic data at rest tell the truth of the crime. And will you have bias and emotions and feelings? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't misconstrue or stretch the data to be something it's not. But you also shouldn't have judgments like I did initially because I worked a terrible rape investigation at my first job, and the person really did do it. So in my mind, that is where I was supposed to do forensics, and I was so wrong. So you have to dig. And this is how I did it. This is just an example here. So you see text messages, and that one on the left-hand side, it shows that there are 6 conversations containing 45 messages back and forth. I went into that raw data and I started keyword searching around, and that's how I found it. So the tools will let you get to it, You just have to know how to dig. And that's something I try to teach people. Many of you are probably way too young for Casey Anthony. But Casey Anthony, I learned a lot of lessons. I was very young in my career. I think I was 24 years old, learning how to do internet browser forensics. The expert testified incorrectly in this case. So Casey Anthony was accused of murdering her daughter and putting her in a trunk. I do believe Casey Anthony did this, and she's had all kinds of TV shows and blogs and gross stuff where people follow her and support her. And it's kind of wild. Casey did get away with murder. The issue is your tool will show you multiple hits. So in this example here, you can see I have bok choy recipe highlighted. If you look, things like autofill will say, oh, bok choy was searched for by the user 82 times. But really, it was searched for once. And that's exactly what happened there. Chloroform was searched for once by Casey Anthony. But an expert for the prosecution got up and said it was hundreds of hits. The defense hired an expert that said, no, this guy actually has no idea what he's talking about. She searched for it one time, but it introduced doubt. Because remember, in the United States, beyond reasonable doubt, if there's any reasonable doubt, what else did the prosecution get wrong? So you have to be really careful with this. I am notorious for keeping browser tabs open. If you have browser tabs open, this can happen all the time. I'm sure that many of you followed or heard of the Karen Reed trial. My really good friend Ian Whiffen testified about Safari history on House Long to Die in the Cold and what the truth is, because if you keep tabs open, the dates and times don't make sense, the numbers don't make sense. And this is such an integral thing that needs to be trained to people so they don't make mistakes by just trusting the tools. All right, now we're going to get into some cool stuff. Health data. Health data is something we can get no matter what. It's very easy. As long as you even have a backup file from an iPhone, we can get your Apple Health data. When we're looking at these things, and this is just for your information here on how Apple names some things. I like how it's called HealthDB Secure. .SQLite, there's nothing secure about it. All your workouts, all your friends, if you have fitness friends, you can see their locations, all your achievements, non-workout information. So when you are passively resting, all of these things come into play. I have worked so many cases now where health data comes into it. That Emily Noble one I mentioned, health data was huge. I recently helped with a fire investigation, and they wanted to prove that someone walked up and down stairs to help the ATF see if they dumped the accelerant. So all of these things come into play. But these two things right here, dragging a body. I had a detective reach out and say, Heather, I need help with Apple Health. Can you see spikes in heart rate if someone drags a body down a hill and then climbs back up? And I was like, I'm sure I can. I'm going to try this. Now, this is going to get a little gruesome because the person I'm going to show you is my ex-husband, which I was like, I think it's kind of funny now. So what I did, I took my own phone. I looked at my data. I looked at a timestamp, and you're going to see these spikes in activity. So in this middle photo where it shows my health data from my phone, the one where it says max 177, that was me doing a workout. And you could track that in health data where it shows I was running on a treadmill. But then where that bright red arrow is, it shows an unusual spike. And that's what's interesting. So what that is this. And I'm going to play this little video for you so you can see this was terrible. I hurt my hamstring. This is all for testing for investigators. This is the stuff I get myself into. The best, my son is yelling mom in the background. The other best, the person recording this is my neighbor. And I texted her and said, hey, can you come over and record me dragging his body? And she said, yes, I can. She didn't even ask questions. She just stood there and recorded it. But this was so hard. So look at my struggle. You can see things are not going well. And then I finally get it going. And I'm in improper gear for dragging bodies, but it was hard. So this is what it looked like forensically. You can see here that I have these normal spikes, but then I'm trying, my heart rate went up. There's no workout. There's not a lot of steps, but I am exerting extreme effort. So looking at the data like this would really help in a crime. Now, the other one, this is so morbid, but my son was like, "Oh, I want you to do that to me." So I like put him on the tarp and ran around the yard because I can't explain to, at that time he was like 4 years old, to a 4 year old, this is what mommy's doing. And this is what happens in the world. But this is the chaos that I get myself into. These are the things that make my mind work in digital forensics where I'm like, there has to be a way to prove that the person did A, B, and C leading to this crime or didn't. So if I looked at data, I was like, yeah, it's not there. And that's what happened in that fire. I was like, nope, I don't see any stair activity. But you have to remember, you are doing exactly what they asked for and nothing more. And that's where I think it's a little bit hard in digital forensics because you become emotionally attached to certain things. Maybe you've seen too much on TV. With Idaho murders, my husband and I did a really good job. We didn't watch Dateline. We tried to not read any blogs. TikTok kind of put it in my face a little more than I wish it did, but we tried to just focus on the data and what was there or what wasn't. So if this type of stuff interests you, what I recommend is getting a degree that would help. And now I say this like, think about your backup plan. Any science degree is acceptable easily. If not, get something else that supports it. GX certs are huge. Every place I've worked, it was, does the person have this experience or these GX certifications? There's free training everywhere. SANS does the workshops always. We have so many things that are out there at summits, at different training events, all the CTFs. So if any of this is of interest to you, there are so many hackathons, CTFs. It's awesome. At Celebrate, I'm building one right now. We're going to release it and it'll be phone forensics based, but it's for free and you can play for 4 days with a tool license. And we'll purposely write questions that the tools are wrong to teach you lessons. And then we write blogs after. It's a great way to learn, especially if any of this like piques your interest a little bit. There's tons of books out there. If anyone wants access to my books, if you go, I'm going to type it in the chat actually, FOR585.com/books. You can get the second, oh, that has to be lowercase. Let me delete that. Hang on. I'm going to write it again. It must be all lowercase or my shortener will break. But if you go to FOR585.com/books, you can get a free copy of Practical Mobile Forensics Second Edition and Learning iOS Forensics First Edition, who was written, that book was written by my co-author of Forensic 500, Mattia Epifani. So those are free books if you ever want to research and just take a look and see if these things are of interest to you. Don't forget me. I can help you. If you hear any of this and you're like, wow, digital forensics sounds awesome, I would love to assist you and point you to certain ways. And I will give you access, Mel, if you request access. I will help you. Networking is your key. I was in the right place at the right time. And this launched my career into something that I truly adore. I love my job. It doesn't feel like work every minute. A lot of minutes, it does feel like work. But the way I see it is I have kids, I have a great husband, I enjoy my home life. If something's going to keep me from being with them all the time, I want to love it. And that's why I think digital forensics is the best. But you can also Google SANS.edu. Viv is our marketing person in digital forensics incident response, and she is fantastic and always trying to put free things out there. Another aspect of DFIR, and it's not in the title, but it's threat hunting. So threat hunting kind of falls into both realms, but it is something a little bit different. So if you go out to DFIR, you'll see all of these and the course coins and all the cool things. If you follow Idaho murders, you'll see some of the chaos. You'll also see some of the people who think they know the data better than anyone else, the internet sleuths of the world, including a lot of my friends that text me like, well, I saw this. Is this true? Just because of what they read. The goal is to put the truth behind the investigation. Here's some contact information for me. If you reach out to me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, or Blue Sky, I do try to respond as quickly as possible. If you need career help, if you need a resource or a reference or something, Heather at Smarter Forensics is a better one. I'm also Barnhart at SANS.org. I do blog. I try to post presentations and things that I do on Smarter Forensics. That's my website. So I try to put all the things in all the places, but sometimes it's asking the right person for help. And that's all you need is someone to pull you in that proper direction. And that's what I try to do for people as often as I can. Any questions for me? And I like you all chiming in along this way.
Yeah, feel free to put questions in the chat or the Q&A. We will get to
Mm.
all as many as we can.
Yeah, I see a question right now about LLMs and Gen AI to enable your investigations. So this is where it's tricky. I would in Idaho murders specifically, we found a lot of log files on his Android that we had no idea what they meant. And I would have loved to feed that into AI and say, what does this mean? Or tell me every single time that Wi-Fi was turned off. But we didn't have an LLM that was local on our system or air gapped that wouldn't go out to the internet. So we weren't allowed to do that. So that was one of the issues we had. But now I've learned so much from taking training from Dan DeBovian and others at SANS, where I'm like, oh, you can actually have a local LLM that doesn't touch any internet. And that would have been so helpful. But Marco, my big thing, AI is built into a lot of the tools. I have used it in my Celebrate tools for topic detection. So if we know that people refer to drugs as baby, we can say, okay, how many times is baby mentioned in these chats? Now, sometimes it could be wrong. It could be take the baby to the doctor, and they actually mean that. So that's where a human has to validate everything. I think it can get a lot better. Mary DeGrazia, who is a 500 instructor, she is writing an AI course right now on that exact question, Marco. It's going to be one day, it's going to be digital. Her materials due at the end of August. So we hope to have the alpha and the beta soon. But that's a course you may want to look into. It's training people how to do exactly what you asked.
Let me ask this question from Ryan in the Q&A.
Okay.
He said, do the later FOR courses cover anti-forensic methods and how to identify or mitigate such efforts? He's only in FOR 500. He's testing on Tuesday, but looking forward to
Ooh.
more advanced material.
Yes. So I don't know which version of FOR 500 you're taking right now, if you're on demand with me or Chad, but we are trying to put in more of the anti-forensic spin as much as possible. Now that I'm done with Idaho murders and can talk about it, that's going to be built right back into 500. But in forensics 585, the smartphone class, and 577 and 508, all of those that branch a little bit further, you will learn the anti-forensics as well. If you take ever 589, this is our cybercrime investigations. It actually has a range that is built as the cyber underground dark web to show you how criminals succeed. That is as anti-forensics as you can get, which I think is pretty awesome. And I saw another question up top about military, National Guard. Giovanni, so welcoming. I am very lucky right now that I work for two companies that love post-military. So SANS, all of our executive people are prior military. At Celebrate, they're an Israeli-based company. In Israel, everyone serves in the military. So their culture loves when people opt in from other countries to serve their country. But any resume I see with military experience, prior law enforcement or anything like that, my heart leans heavily toward that because I know I needed it. I needed it to pay for my tuition. So everyone joins for different reasons, but I think it's awesome. and it's very supportive.
What about those without military experience? Do those folks have a easy way to get into DFIR?
Yes, especially if it doesn't require security clearance. So that's another thing with the military. Typically, you have a security clearance, so it costs less to hire you because you're already cleared. Consulting firms, GIAC certs, like you all are lucky in being in this program because you are getting trained from some of the best people on the planet, better than many typical professors and others. So you are already leaps and bounds above the average human that would apply for any of these things. And then you also have access to experts that can help pull you into where they already work.
All right. Someone is asking, have you ever come across anyone with a heavy data background that has transitioned into DFIR?
Yes, I have. Not only heavy data background, but I hired one of my best employees ever was a hotel manager at Marriott. He was 45 years old when I hired him to start doing DFIR, and he is fantastic to this day, like one of the best. But if you understand, I knew nothing. I didn't even know what a hard drive was. And on my first search warrant, I remember my boss saying, "Go get the hard drives out of the computer." And he looked at my face. He's like, "Heather, you don't know what a hard drive is, do you?" It's like, I sure don't." So I knew how to check email and use Excel, and I got to hear. So always remember that. There's an instructor, Megan Roddy. This is a great example. She just got promoted to certified instructor today. And I remember Megan's first teach. She called me crying and she's like, "Heather, I can't teach people." One of the students called me out and said, "You don't have any real work experience. You're too young," which is unfortunate. It happens to everyone when you're first starting in DFIR. Today, she said her workplace asked her to rank between 1 and 8 what her knowledge of Google Workspace was, and she gave herself an 8. And her manager said, "If you gave yourself an 8, you are telling me you're one of the top 5 experts in the world in Google Workspace." And she's like, "That's what I'm telling you." And I reminded her of where she started when she was crying. And in 3 years, just that imposter syndrome and getting rid of it. Anyone can do this. If you are curious, if you like to dig through data, if you like potentially looking at crimes, if you understand anything cyber, you can do this. You definitely can. Oh, Greg, that's a good question. I just had a call with Huntington Bank and then with Kroll. And Kroll specifically hires people to be a bridge between digital forensics and SOC. So they want people that understand a little bit of both so that they can better educate their leadership on what is needed. So there are a lot of organizations that actually do that. And it's interesting that you specifically asked about that one. But Kroll, Strauss Friedberg, all of those organizations, KPMG, they need that and they pay really well. That's another good thing about this career field. The pay is great. So it's nice to love it. It's nice to be rewarded for it. But it's also amazing when you can look at a family and tell someone why it happened. And that's really what I wanted to do with Idaho. And sadly, we can't. But we can tell them, like, hey, he was paranoid and he knew what he did and he was paranoid about it. So that can possibly give some relief. But if you can also stop crimes before they start, it's amazing. And I'm definitely biased. I love this job and I love this field. And I hope that you all take interest in it because I think it's great.
All right. Lucas wants to know, as someone who just got their GSEC and is currently pursuing their GCIH, what might be the best course or courses to take from SANS to move into DFIR? Would one be qualified to move into an entry-level DFIR position with just their GSEC and GCIH?
You could with GSEC and GCIH, but I think understanding how data is collected and quick intel you can get from it would help you. So I would recommend adding Forensics 498 to that as a minimum, just because it teaches you everything from a hard drive to network traffic, cloud data, drones. It's going to teach you what is potentially available in all those. So it give you a lot of speaking points in job interviews.
All right. And then another question, is the career outlook and pay for DFIR more optimistic than maybe pen testing or red teaming?
Oh, that's a good question. So, Mel, I don't know what pen testing and red teaming pays, but I know in DFIR, if you're truly, most people start as digital forensics. And then the luster goes into the IR because IR is a lot of consulting and they bill you out at really high rates. So you can make more money. The more people bill you, you can demand a little bit more. Um, it depends on what you're investigating. Now, this sounds unfortunate what I'm about to say, but it's the truth. If you go to your local police department and you say, I want to be a detective, you're not going to make a lot of money. Now, we need people to do that, but that's not where the money is. I often have students that ask really great questions. I'm like, hey, when you don't want to be in the military anymore, or when you don't want to be a police officer anymore, please call me because you could make a ton of money. Now, we want people in law enforcement doing these jobs, but there's more money out there when you're not tied to law enforcement or government. And government does pay well, but there's a step rate and then you're stuck. So you will see so many people that will reach out and say, I'm ready to retire, Heather, help me get my real money now in my career.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, good one came in.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I'll read it out just so everyone can hear it. Have you met successful people in DFIR coming from SOC background, and will client-based experiences differ than a vendor experience in IR?
Um, so for the second part, that depends on who you're working for and what they're asking you to do. But Wendy Whitmore, if you look her up, Wendi, she is now the CISO at Palo Alto. She started with a SOC background, and she is one of the most successful women that I know in this career field. And she's brilliant and she's wonderful and she's kind and she'll help anyone. And definitely, I put her up there on a pedestal of amazing people. Thank you for all these questions. This has been great.
Does anyone else have a question? Got like a couple more minutes. All right, I'm going to read one question that you guys submitted in advance. What are your favorite tips and techniques for timelining during an
Mm.
incident?
Oh, Lord. You know what? I have been haunted by this with the Idaho murders. I I used the timeline template that we give in Forensics 500 and I started filling it out. One thing that I strongly recommend, so I've been working that case 2.5 years. So you forget things. In your timeline, always include the detail on where you got that information. Where did that artifact come from? Like even simple things. Today, talking to the New York Times, they were like, when did he search for serial killers? Where did you find him? Like, let me look. And I was like, oh, it's in his downloads on his PC from this date. But it's so easy to forget something that I looked at in April of 2023. So always include where it came from. Now, I don't trust any tools to timeline, none of them, because they all make mistakes and they can't say what is human created versus what the machine created. So I do it myself, which is, I think, best practices. It's not easy. You can start with your tools, but then when you validate and you find key things, just always remember to list where it came from.
And then I'm going to ask one more question that was submitted in advance, because I think this is one that we get quite a bit. You talked a little bit about, hard skills that people need to know, but what are some soft skills that people might need for this field?
You have to be curious and you have to be willing to have every day be a little bit different. So everyone always says patience. I am not a patient human. You can ask Betsy. My patience, if anything, I fake it. I fake being patient. So I don't think you have to be patient, but you also have to be willing to ask questions. So I think just being conversational in nature, being curious will help you succeed so much. You don't need public speaking skills. When I first started public speaking, I used to get a rash up my neck, like real hives. It was awful. I used to think I'll never be able to talk to more than two people at a time. because I was terrified. And I learned to overcome that. And now I can take a stage at RSA and do things. Do I still get nervous? Absolutely. Do I have imposter syndrome every single day? But I'm curious and I'm willing to talk about it.
All right, one last question came in. We've got someone who's new to the cyber field. They just completed our applied cybersecurity program. Any recommendations to help them gain some more cyber experience beyond the certs in order to land a job in forensics?
I would do some of the free online workshops where you get hands-on. I would also play in any vendor CTF, any Net Wars type experience, anything that you could in an interview say, oh yeah, I actually have looked at data from this device, or I understand network traffic from this thing. Even if it's Net Wars related, it doesn't matter. You playing these games and things that are available to you can make you have more hands-on experience than someone that's worked cases for 3 years. So never doubt the power behind getting behind a keyboard and trying something.
Oh, this is a good question. Are there any forensics groups, meetups, memberships that you would recommend to help with networking?
Oh, yes. So ISSA, if you look them up, they have regional ones. I have been invited. I went to ISSA in California, in Seattle. I'm going up to Rochester. So they will fly in experts to speak to your regional groups on different topics. I'm a member of HTCIA as well. However, I have to note HTCIA did kick me out for a few years for working that Lamar Owens case because they didn't support defense work. So I refused to join back until they accepted data as data, which they do now. Those are two good ones that are open to everyone, but ISSA is really taking off. There's also for women in cyber, there's WeSys, and that's how you pronounce it. It looks like Y sis, but they want it to be like we sisters do things together. They have been fantastic as well.
Any other last questions before we wrap up? Well, we got one more in the chat. Are there any volunteering opportunities for digital forensics?
Hmm, that's a good question. That is one that I don't know of other than finding internships with places that may accept it. But typically the volunteering to help, you could do it possibly on like sextortion efforts or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They will take volunteers, but a lot of places can't because they need someone to testify to it.
Any last questions? We're a little over the time, but I want to make sure you guys can get your last question in before we send Heather on her way. No? All right. Well,
I love that I'm loving 500 and hating shell bags. That's how I feel about event logs.
all right, everyone. Well, thank you so much, Heather. We really appreciated you taking your time today to do this presentation. If you guys do ever have any more questions, and obviously Heather put her info on the last slide. We really appreciate you guys coming, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.